There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Joshua. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. So last week, we left Joshua and Israel regretting this covenant that they made with the Gibeonites, who were the native Hittites living in the city of Gibeon. And though the Gibeonites deceived the leaders of Israel, this covenant was binding because Israel swore in the name of the Lord. And though it was wrong on Israel's part, I believe God was very aware of the Gibeonites, and He provided a way for them to be saved, to give them a life instead of death. And when you look at Gibeon now, well, they have peace with God now that they're accepted by God. Where before they served God, they were deathly afraid of Him, what He would do to them, because they had no relationship with this God of Israel. And so now that the Gibeonites are saved, it's just like it is with us. When we become Christians and when we get saved, we're now God's enemies are mad. And the people who were once our allies, these people who we once had fellowship in our common godless causes, and they begin to attack us, and they try to destroy this new relationship that we have with God. And so now we begin chapter 10, and we read about this king that comes from Jerusalem. And this is the first time in the Bible that we ever hear of the city of Jerusalem. And this king's name is Adoni-Zedek, which probably sounds a little familiar to most of us because it sounds a lot like Melchizedek. And Melchizedek, he was the king of Salem. He was the one who had come to Abraham in the book of Genesis. And the city of Salem, where King Melchizedek was from, is the same city as Jerusalem, where Adoni-Zedek is from. And so some people suggest that Zedek is just the name of a dynasty, that it's a dynasty name given to the kings from Jerusalem. And where Melchizedek means king of righteousness, Adoni-Zedek means Lord of righteousness. But this king, he is not a righteous king at all. In fact, he's an evil king. And he's heard of Joshua, and he's heard about how he conquered Ai, and he's heard about how he's destroyed Jericho with its king. And there's already been one meeting of the evil empire where the kings of all the Southland areas have all decided to join forces. And we read about that last week back in chapter 9. And it was only the city of Gibeon, which was the only kingdom who had opted out of this alliance. And so now this king, Adoni-Zedek, he hears that Israel has peace with Gibeon and that they have a defense pact. Where now Gibeon, who was this former ally of all the other kings, has now made peace with the invaders, Israel. And what's really bothering King Adoni-Zedek is why Gibeon would join forces with Israel. Because Gibeon was not a small city like Ai. Gibeon was a force to be contended with. It was a city that could hold its own in a battle. It was a great state. It was a wealthy kingdom. It was a royal kingdom. It was a warrior city filled with trained men of war who all carried some weight in the community. And it was probably something else that was bothering this king. And it's where he is seeing that Israel isn't like them. That Israel, that they're conquering these places like Jericho, and they're taking nothing from it. But they only did it for the glory of God. And then the same thing with Ai, where they destroyed it, but they didn't use it to make a profit. And that's because that's not the way that they did business. Because of all these small kingdoms, They were all about war. That's what they did. That's how their kingdoms were structured. That's how they made a living. It was all about building these armies, building them bigger and stronger and better armies. And when they came to your city, they would take all your food. They would take anything they wanted. They would rape your women, they'd take all your animals, and they would make your people their slaves. But Israel didn't do that. Their God was their cause. So for them, it wasn't about acquiring stuff. It was about pleasing him. And this God was giving them a place. And the place he's giving them is a place that these kingdoms have been living for years. And now Israel is in alliance with one of the most powerful kingdoms in Canaan, a royal city. And so now King Adonizedek, he calls the dark forces together again for a second meeting of the evil alliance, and they change their strategy. And now they decide to attack the kingdom that dared to stand up against the crowd. They to go against the Gibeonites. So if they won't join us, they're no longer our friends. We will destroy you, and we'll destroy your new friends, which is the same way it is for a lot of us as believers. Where our old friends, they don't want to hang out with us anymore. Now that you found God, and you find it's because they hate the things of God. And so now they don't like you anymore. And you kind of wonder if it ever crossed any of the minds of any of these other kingdoms, if Israel's God was willing to make peace with any of them. But I don't think it ever crossed any of their minds. And I think it's because they hate God and that they loved the way they lived their life. And so this was not going to be a fair fight. This was going to be 5 kings against 1. And these are the 5 largest, most powerful kingdoms in all of southern Canaan. And it will be against the one who dared to defect, the one who changed their beliefs. And southern Canaan, it was not a unified nation. Adonizedek, he brought them all together. But these are all important cities because of their locations and because of their association with the trade routes. But they're not brave enough to attack Israel directly, but they're not afraid to attack Gibeon at all. And God here, he is using all of these events for his own purposes, so that all of these city-states could be conquered at one time. So this is instead of Israel having to go fight each one of them one by one inside of their walled cities. And so now these 5 kings, their armies, they show up at Gibeon's doorstep, and they camp right outside of Gibeon. But Gibeon, they were able to get some messengers out to Joshua, and they say, "Don't forsake your servants, save us. Because all the Amorite kings are surrounding us, because we're allied with you." So Gibeon here is proclaiming protection under the basis of their covenant relationship with Israel, because now they belong to them. They are their servants. And I don't know, but if you were Joshua here, and you knew that you had made this bad covenant with these people, where the covenant you made actually caused you to break God's commandment, you might be tempted to think, well, good, problem solved. They will take care of this bad covenant that we made, and we won't be guilty about it at all because we didn't break our covenant. We didn't destroy them. And you might even want to think that God was doing this for you until God speaks to you and he tells you not to fear them. I have delivered all of them into your hand. And so here Joshua, he doesn't turn his back on Gibeon, even if this would get him out of making his bad vow. Because what you have to see here is that God is even using Joshua's mistake of making this covenant with Gibeon to accelerate his conquest of Canaan. And it's just like how God had used Joshua's mistake at Ai to be able to conquer Ai and Bethel. Because God will even use our mistakes and sometimes even our own disobedience toward his victories that he has for us in our lives if we're committed to doing his will. And every time God has promised Joshua a victory, Joshua's had a victory. And then by God saying, I have delivered them into your hand. Not a man of them shall stand before you. What God is saying here, in the way he's saying this is a prophetic past tense, which means that this is a done deal. But even though it's given, and even though it's a done deal, it doesn't mean that you don't have to work for it. And it doesn't even mean you don't have to work hard for it. You might have to work until you're all worn out. And as Christians, just like Israel, we will be battling our enemies for the rest of our lives. And so God must have spoken to Joshua immediately after the messengers arrive, because what they do is they leave right away and they take off that night and they march all night long. And that march was 20 miles long and it was all uphill. It was 3,300 feet uphill. And so this would have taken them between 8 to 10 hours to make that climb. And so that means it took them the whole night. And that all of those men, they had to be weary when they arrived. But even being weary, the Lord set up all the circumstances, and God routed the enemy right in front of them, where it says, Israel came upon them suddenly. And so at the city of Gibeon, Israel killed the enemy with a great slaughter. But it's not over yet, because they start chasing the enemy downhill on this road that goes down to Beth Horon. And that's about a 800 feet drop to Azekah. And so this is a very steep slope, and it levels off every so often, and it has all these terraces. And so Israel, they continue down, and they're killing a lot of men on the descent. And then God starts assisting them, and he starts casting down these large hailstones on the enemy. And it says that God killed more with his hailstones than Israel did with their swords. And some people will try to make this sound like this was some kind of natural phenomenon, but it can't be, because it was only the enemy soldiers that were hit. There was not one Jew killed here. And you have to see that God, he has unlimited resources, and that he's willing to use them for us to succeed in our lives, for his plans for our lives. But in the same way, God, he also has unlimited resources to use against us if we decide to rebel against him. And that would be like with the story of Jonah. And here now Joshua, he's seeing this miracle of these hailstones, and it gives Joshua this boldness to ask for another miracle. Because even after this miraculous hailstones, the victory isn't still complete. Joshua, he still doesn't have enough daylight left to finish the task he was commanded by God. And so Joshua, he shouts out publicly in front of everybody, and he says, sun, stand still over Gibeon. And then he shouts, moon in the valley of Ajalon. Because Joshua wants to keep this battle going. He wants it completed once and for all. And I like how God records Joshua praying this prayer out loud publicly.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.